Greetings, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Metal Command podcast. Tony here with you, and today I am talking about why I think Jag Panzer is quite possibly going to put out their best album ever, and it could potentially be Album of the Year for 2023. I know that's a big prediction, and I know that's a long way away, but I think they are going to put out a spectacular album. I'm going to give you 3 reasons as to why I think that, and I'm going to give you my top 5 Jag Panzer albums and why I have those albums in my top 5. But before I get into that, if you like what you see and hear on the video, please hit the subscribe button and please hit that little bell to be notified anytime I do post a video. And I'm curious what your thoughts are, folks. If you're a Jag Panzer fan, where do you see this? And especially after listening to what I have to say, do you feel this is either A, going to be one of the best albums they've ever put out, or do you feel that it could be their best album that they've ever put out? Honestly, obviously, I'm making a pretty bold prediction here, but I have a lot of reasons for that. I'm going to give you 3 of them right now. So let's talk about the first one. Now, I've known Mark Briody for 25 years, and over that 25 years, I have, through the radio show, have watched each Jag Panzer album get released since the Age of Mastery, which have been 98, 99, around that area, around that era. And I remember how those albums were received by myself, by the magazines, and how Mark reacted when talking about them when I've had him on the show. And I have to say, folks, my first reasoning as to why I think this album is going to be great is the amount of excitement he's displayed over the amount of excitement he's had over this album, talking about it on Facebook. Now, it is a concept album. I believe it's the first concept album they have ever put out since Chained to the Throne, which I'll talk about that album a little bit later. But it's going to be their first concept album since Chained to the Throne. And I believe it's only the second concept album they've ever done that I know of. So there's a lot of hype. He's talking about it. I've never seen this man this excited about an album. And he's so excited about it, he's doing a completely different approach too as far as the record goes. He's actually got an old school snail mail mailing list, like the ones that bands and their fan clubs would have used 20, 25 years ago. And he sent out postcards to tons of different people, which I think is cool. It's got like an album cover on it. It's really getting you excited to want to see this. Not only that, but I do want to thank Mark for the support for the Metal Command radio show and the support that he's given this show over the last 25 years. Because, even though I come on here to support the bands that I love, it doesn't really get talked about enough how much they support people like myself. Not just me, but other people in general. And he sent out to 50 of us in the metal community that really do promote heavy metal this cool card, which actually came in this really awesome envelope. Now look at how cool this is, man. This is phenomenal. And this card, and when you open it up, it plays something. I'm actually going to play it for you, folks. You can check this out. Here we go. Right here.
Welcome to the Hallowed. Our small band of survivors traversed the frozen wasteland in search of a suitable home. We were guided by animals we had trained. However, that alliance would not last. We will shackle the
All right, so that is the really cool little card. It's got a little forward to the concept of the album, and a lot of cool stuff in here. But I really feel privileged and really thank Mark for sending me this. And then, of course, they have the other thing that's really cool: a comic book, a companion to the album that is totally intertwined into the story. Now, I'm going to have Mark Briody on the show sometime very soon. I'm not going to go into, he explained the album concept to me a little bit, and he has online a little bit, but I'm going to let him go into that when he comes on the show. I'd rather not sit and get into that right now. But there's this really cool comic book that he has also put up for sale that you can buy, and it's a companion to the album, which I think is great. But the amount of hype, I remember when the Deviant Chord came out. Now, the Deviant Chord, I'll flat out spoil it right now, is my favorite Jag Panzer album ever. I just think they hit the nail on the head with that record, and he was pretty hyped up about that. But the new album they just recorded, he has been like 10 times more excited about this than the previous one. And most of the time, and this is where my reasoning comes in, most of the time when a band member is really that excited and into what they are doing, the album is usually pretty good. And usually probably among the best in the band's catalog. So that's reason number one. Reason number two is Harry Conklin. And why do I say reason number two? Why do I say it's Harry Conklin? Because Harry Conklin, I'm going to flat out tell you folks, this man gets better as a singer as he gets older. Now, I had seen him live years ago. I actually seen him live twice. The first time was in a small club called the Flying Machine here in, near the Cleveland area. Jag Panzer played with Iced Earth and I think Anvil. I don't remember, but the show was kind of, the actual venue was was pretty much a garbage place. It's a garbage venue. I don't think the bands really seemed that happy about playing there, but needless to say, I got to see them live and they really killed it. The Fourth Judgment had come out and the Age of Mastery had just come out. And that was right around the time when I first started my show. And I interviewed Mark in my car in I think it was like the dead of winter. I think it was really cold at the time. And we talked about the Age of Mastery and I got to see them live and Harry was great. And then I think it was 2003, they opened for Halloween on some gigs here in the US. So I had not seen Harry Conklin, and I have not seen Jag Panzer since, but I saw Harry Conklin playing with the Three Tremors right back here, as you see this little backdrop I have here. And I'll tell you, Harry Conklin was on stage and holding his own with the likes of Tim Ripper Owens and Sean Peck. These guys are phenomenal vocalists. And Harry fit right in with these guys. I mean, and the thing is, the way he was singing live with Tim and Sean was unbelievable. In fact, I'd never heard anything vocally that I can remember come out of him like that in a live setting. Because again, I've only seen him twice, but he held his own with those guys and sounded great with them. And I'm thinking to myself, man, this guy is going to have a strong vocal performance on this album. I really think so. And I can tell you that if he's does anything even close to what he did on the Three Tremors stuff, he's definitely going to deliver a performance. So I'm really optimistic about that. I think that element in the band with Harry is going to be phenomenal. And then the last reason number three, why I think Jag Panzer is going to probably put out the best album they've ever done, is the fact that the band has really gotten better and really refined itself quite a bit since the early 2000s. In my opinion, they have really, like Casting the Stones to me is one of the greatest records they've ever done. And they've really been pretty consistent about doing that. But the last album to me was such a jump. The Deviant Chord was such a jump from the album before it. And I just have a feeling this record is going to be that way. They're on this upward trend, in my opinion. And I don't think they've really hit the ceiling yet. I think they are really going to put out probably a pretty stellar release, as I talked about before. So I'm really looking forward to their album. I am looking forward to having Mark on this show. I do want to talk about one last thing before I get into my top 5 Jag Panzer albums. First of all, I want to thank Mark and the band for not only kicking ass and doing what they do, but for really recognizing and supporting my show. So this comic book, for example, is really cool. Check this out. This is phenomenal. It's a companion to the actual album itself. But what really was really cool is Mark had come to me and said, hey, would you be he went out there and said, is anybody interested in maybe having their show advertised in a comic book, and we'll put it in there. And I said, hey, I would do it. And he put the Metal Command podcast in there, which I think is absolutely cool. Not only was my podcast in there, but there are other people's stuff like this one here. You know, this, he put this in there. People that have contributed to the metal community over the years, he did this for. And man, I got to tell you what, this is where I talk about bands supporting the show. I am absolutely honored and grateful that Mark and the rest of the band were okay with this and did this. So guys, I really thank you. Sincerely, I appreciate it. And man, it's truly an honor for a band to do that for me, because no band has ever done anything that cool ever. At least for me, they haven't. As far as, putting the show logo inside of, either an album or the companion to an album. So now I will get Mark on the show, but now I'm going to give you my top 5 albums from Jag Panzer right now. So we're going to talk about number 5 favorite albums by Jag Panzer. I'm going to go do like a countdown. The Age of Mastery. The Age of Mastery, to me, that was the first album I really got into by them, but I went back and listened to it, and I still love the album to this day. Great songs. They have the modern version of Chain of Command, and they just have a lot of great songs on it. And it also holds a lot of great memories for me, because that was a record that really had a big impact on me, ended up getting me into the band ultimately, and that is when I became a fan. Number four on this list would be Ample Destruction. Now, I know there's a lot of people that worship this record and think it should be number 1. I get it, and I get for at the time it was released, you really didn't have a lot of bands that sounded like them. But over the years, to me, I think they have put out much better albums, and I really think sometimes people really get too stuck on this record to where they really don't give the newer stuff a chance as much as they should. But it's number 4 for me. It's still a great record. It's a classic metal album from the 80s, and it hits it at number 4. And at number 3, maybe a little bit controversial to some people, depending on who you are. Either you love this album or you hate this album, but that would be Tane to the Throne. And Tane to the Throne was a concept album that people, either they really got it and loved it, or they were kind of like, yeah, we really don't care for this. The reviews were pretty mixed at the time for this album, but it resonated really well with me. But it was one of those records that I had to listen to multiple times to really get into it, because when I first listened to it, I really wasn't a huge fan of the album until I started really getting into the concept. And one day I had to go on a long drive somewhere, and it happened to be in the car, because we didn't have MP3 players back in those days. And I listened to it, and then I fell in love with the record after that. So that's number 3 on my list of favorite Jag Panzer albums. Number 2 on the list, give it to me right now. It is Casting the Stones. And boy, I can tell you that a lot of reviewers, when this album came out, were really casting stones at the album and really didn't like it. In fact, it probably received more harsh reviews from magazines than any of the records, at least that I can remember, that they have put out. Which is odd, because everybody that I know at that time and now loves the record. I hadn't heard of anybody disliking it, but except for these magazines that were really bashing the album itself. But that's number 2. I think that's a great album. And of course, number 1, as I mentioned before, The Deviant Chord, probably musically the most refined record they have done to date. And this new one could possibly knock it off its number 1 spot. So with that said, that's my opinion. Obviously, I'd like to hear your opinion. Please leave a comment if you agree or disagree with me. And please hit subscribe and like the video, and check out metalcommand.net. So with that said, thanks for watching. Have a good night.